So welcome to the new hire orientation procurement request form. I had mentioned in my previous overview of procurement that we'd be looking to go over both independent cost estimates and at some point the procurement request form. So today we're going to go over the procurement request form. So what is a procurement request form? Sometimes you'll see it acronymed as a PRF. It's a completely internal acronym. It's just short for procurement request form. This form is an internal agency, a document completed by the person making a request to purchase a product or acquire a service. I will be showing you a copy of that form coming up here. The form is submitted to procurement after it is signed by whoever is requesting an item, and all the items requested in the form are available to submit to the procurement department, and we'll get to the details of what all that is. The form is received and reviewed by myself currently, the procurement manager, and then I provide it to the executive director for her signature, so I get it to Stacy for her to sign. When she receives this form, this is her cue that the procurement process has begun. My request of you is that as soon as you know you need a product or service, reach out to me to go over this form. This might happen for you 6 months or a year in advance of when you need something, because we do go through planning meetings annually or a couple of times a year. And it's a really good habit to get into, to pull out this form, look at this form for yourself so you know everything you need to do in order to be prepared when you'll be making the request. The form itself is located at Admin Procurement Forms Procurement Request Form. This is a reduced version of what the form looks like. We'll go over the details of everything requested in this form. So what is information that is requested on the procurement request form? Following are some of the main items. It's not inclusive of everything you just saw on the form, just some of the main items on the form. So it's good to know when you expect the contract to start or when you expect to issue a purchase order for an item you want to receive. It is important to know the funding source. How will we be paying for the product, equipment, or service you will be acquiring? What is your scope of work? Are you going to be purchasing a desk? Are you writing a scope of work because we're going to hire a consultant to prepare some type of planning document? You need to know how much you estimate the cost of the product or the service you are going to acquire is going to cost the agency. And if this will be a request for proposals, not something we do for construction. It is something we do for consultants. You'll need to know how you're going to evaluate or what the criteria is going to be to evaluate proposals received and who's going to help you evaluate, internal staff persons and external peers. You'll also need to know the names of companies and provide email addresses of those we are going to directly solicit. So basically here it's saying, we shouldn't release a procurement unless we know there is interest and somebody's going to submit a proposal or a bid. So the target contract start date. So in the previous slide here, we talked about some of the main items, 6 of the main items. I'm going to go into more detail of the implications of why, or the better description as to why these are important. So the target contract start date. It's important for the requester and for us in procurement. The date is used to develop the schedule of activities in the solicitation document like you'll see below. And it's based on when we need a product or service and agenda due dates. So normally you're coming to procurement because the items we will procure, the service we will procure, requires board approval. I do also work on thresholds under 30,000, but mostly procurement is involved when the item or service is over 30,000 and we're going to need board approval. So following is a schedule if we were going to do release a request for proposals, which I went into a little bit more detail in my previous orientation video. And just a quick note, this is different if this is an invitation for bids document. Construction or certain other invitation for bids solicitation does not include, for example, intent to negotiate, because we take low bid. So this is an example of a schedule, and it's a good timely schedule, but I wanted to add this so that you could see how far out we could potentially be from being in contract, receiving a product, getting into a contract for a service if we were to release something in January. You'll notice that we wouldn't be executing a contract till June. This is a contract for an actual procurement I am working on currently, and it is, information here is relative to things that are specific to this procurement, but it's just to show you that, we released a procurement, we've got to leave for a question and answer period, time to post an addendum. You'll see there's about a month between when we release and when we expect to receive proposals. This is dependent on how long you think you need the procurement to be out for. In other words, how long does it take for somebody to put a proposal together, depending on what type of work you're requesting. Our policy is no less than 10 business days. For consultants, I don't see anything any less than 4 weeks. It can be up to 6 weeks on complex procurements. It could be 3 months. So again, just an example. And then under F, you'll see virtual interviews. Let me back up. So we have, after receipt of proposals, we evaluate. You'll see a period of time there. That window that you see February through March just depends on what we expect. And we interview when we request for proposals, and we negotiate, and you'll see the time between intent to negotiate and intent to award to be about a month. That is a healthy period of time. Again, this schedule is for an actual procurement, which we expect to switch contractors for, and it is likely that we will have a new contractor, somebody we haven't worked with a little bit of a complex scope of work, and we are building in a month period of time there to go back and forth with their team and their legal counsel, and back and forth with our team and our legal counsel there before we wrap up that contract. I mentioned above that we work on these dates based on agenda due dates. Most in transit and MCAG items will go to the Citizens Advisory Committee, so you'll be paying attention to when the staff report for the CAC is due. And we work backwards from there, and then you'll see the governing board approval of contract, and then the immediate day after the notice of award before we get to contract execution. So that's contract start date and its implications and the importance of that information. Funding source. It's important to know if you have budgeted for what you are acquiring and when you budgeted. For example, if there's grant funds or money that we have been in receipt of for years, it might be the clock has been ticking. It's important to know what we need to what we are working with respect to the funding source. An example is also Federal Transit Administration funds are the source of monies. I need to include certain additional requirements and clauses in that solicitation. If a particular grant is a source of monies, the grant may include a certain requirement that has to be released in that solicitation. So budgeting your items is equally as important because this allows the purchase to be made. It is important that the money that you are using for the product or service has been budgeted. Otherwise, if it hasn't, there's an extra step you would need to take in order for you to proceed with procuring. Scope of work. The scope of work is the description of the work to be performed, and it's necessary to be submitted with the procurement request form. This is what will take you likely the most time to develop, and depending on the complexity of what you are acquiring, this can take you some time, weeks, months, years, just over time, not because something will take you years to write, but something you've been incrementally working towards. In an RFP, the scope of work may be general or as descriptive as you want, so that proposers submit a response and describe to you how they'll accomplish the work. This is common when seeking consultant work. If it's an invitation for bids, you'll be specific in detailing the scope of work. This is commonly used for construction or a specific product. Independent cost estimate, and this is another video I hope to record, is going through an independent cost estimate, but I'll do my best here because there's a lot involved here. An independent cost estimate is a document that describes and details how you arrived at estimating the cost of a service or a product. Its complexity and how much information goes into this document that is the ICE, it's determined by what you are acquiring. Independent simply means that we are independent of having received a quote bid or proposal, and we are to document it as such. So as you're writing the scope of work, as you're preparing to procure months in advance, you're developing your cost estimate. Basically, we are not allowed to estimate the cost after we have viewed a quote bid or a proposal. The cost estimate portion, because I'm trying to break up independent and cost estimate, it's just as described. It's an estimate of the cost you expect the product or service to cost. And the sources for how you arrive at the development of an ICE can be previous agency procurements or contracts, peer agency procurements or contracts, member jurisdiction procurement or contracts. Maybe what you're acquiring, you can obtain information from the internet, some type of website, some type of online search from the industry, or if it's something that's construction related, we could very well be obtaining our estimate from an engineer, from an architect and engineering firm. The ICE is a combination of both a narrative, typing out in sentences and paragraphs describing what you are acquiring, and a cost table showing the dollar amounts of your research. As with the development of the time it takes for you to develop a scope of work, it will also take you some time to develop an independent cost estimate. Ideally, you should be striving to work on a scope of work and ICE concurrently so that you can be processing and working towards these two documents at the same time. An example, an independent cost estimate is a document that describes and details how you arrived at estimating the cost of a product or a service. I'm trying to figure out what this slide was, and I think I just had it a little bit backwards. So there's the details, there's the scope of work, and that's what it was, just a little backwards, and that's okay. Evaluation criteria is an RFP. So if the method of procurement will be a request for proposals, the procurement will require the project manager to develop evaluation criteria. As the project manager, you don't determine whether something will be a request for proposals or not. Procurement's responsible for that. We could talk about that. Likely, if it's a consultant, it's going to be a request for proposals. The evaluation criteria factors based on our policy must fall in the following categories: project approach and the experience of a company, experience of the persons that are assigned to the project, experience working with government agencies, experience working on transit projects if applicable, past achievements, commitment of the persons that will be assigned to the project, and the suitability of the equipment and the services being provided to us, and not the determining factor in an RFP, but can be a factor and usually is the cost or the total price, and including the breakdown of any labor and hours and the credibility of the hours and dollars estimates as related to the proposed approach. This is an example of criteria taken out of an actual procurement. The total is out of 100, and you'll see there just based on my previous example, we went through, it was going to be important to us in the work product that was the result of what we were requesting, the persons assigned, the experience of the persons, and the experience of working on similar projects to our request. The comprehensiveness of the approach the firm was taking to accomplish the work we request for. Sometimes the project schedule, when we are going to receive the work product, is very, very important to us. So if it is, then we put that in the criteria, and then we put the cost. You'll see there in the order of importance, that cost is at the bottom. It's a factor, but not the determining factor. Evaluation criteria is not needed if it's an invitation for bids, if the solicitation document is an invitation for bids. So it says if it will be an invitation for bids, then evaluation criteria is not applicable. It's not applicable because the lowest cost is the determining factor and will be accepted from a bidder, not by a bidder. Have some corrections to make there. So we will accept the lowest cost so long as they're responsive and responsible, and we will take the lowest. Evaluators, internal and external. Internal staff will participate on the evaluation committee. Typically, the project manager participates, and maybe one or two additional internal staff. Staff should be on the committee because they have subject matter knowledge. External evaluators will also participate on the evaluation committee, and this is part of our policy as well. External evaluators are peers and subject matter experts and can be from member agencies or local jurisdictions. Company names and email addresses to directly solicit. Project managers are to identify consultants or vendors that are available to submit a proposal or a bid prior to us releasing a solicitation. Project manager is to identify at least 2 interested vendors that will submit a response, and you will provide the names, phone numbers, and email addresses on the procurement request form. Other information on the procurement request form. Other information is requested on the form. All information is important and it's relevant. And I just always ask, when in doubt, ask me. Remember to reach out to me as soon as you know you have a need for a product or service. I ask this because this allows your expectations to be met, and it allows the agency to acquire what is needed in the time that it's needed. Oftentimes, we start talking about what's needed, and that discussion is starting when we need a product or a service soon. And so the sooner we can talk about it, the sooner we can acquire that product or service and get what the agency needs. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out to me directly. Thank you.